Sing praises to the Lord, O you faithful ones, and give thanks to God's holy name. Let the light of your face shine on us, O Lord. You have put gladness in our heart. You have turned our mourning into dancing. You have taken off our sackcloth and clothed us with joy. Let our souls praise you and not be silent. O Lord our God, we will give thanks to you forever.
epistle reading is 1 John chapter 3, beginning with the first verse. See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. Beloved, we are God's children now. It does not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. Please stand for the reading of the gospel. The gospel reading is Luke chapter 24, beginning with the 36th verse. Jesus himself stood among them, but they were startled and frightened and supposed that they saw a spirit. And he said to them, Why are you troubled, and why do questionings rise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit has not flesh and bones as you see that I have. And while they still disbelieved for joy and wondered, he said to them, Have you anything here to eat? They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate before them. Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. This is the word of God for the people of God.
This week I listened to a podcast that narrated the life story of and was also an interview with someone named Martin Pistorius. Martin lived in South Africa. Pretty cool story. When he was born, he was a really sharp kid. When he was 3, he announced proudly to his parents, I'm going to be an electric boy. And so what he did is he started just fixing and building things. He would repair small appliances around the house that weren't working any longer. This is when he was like 5 years old. He rigged up an alarm system to his Legos, that if his brother touched his Legos, this loud alarm sounded. Got the kid in trouble. So this was Martin. He's a very bright young man, very lovable. But when he was 12, he got very sick, and he got sicker and sicker, and the doctors couldn't figure out what to do, and he got sicker and sicker. Finally, he lapsed into a coma, and the doctors tested and did everything that they could, and they couldn't bring him out of the coma, and the doctors told Martin's parents, Joan and Rodney, that he's just gone. He's just gone. There's no brain activity. He's just a vegetable. Try to keep him comfortable. He'll probably live a few weeks and not beyond that. Martin actually lived 12 years beyond that in that state. And what they did not know, what they could not know, because he was totally listless and unresponsive, is that inside the shell of his body, he was wide awake all the time for 12 years. He would watch his parents come and go, and they would turn him and try to care for him. They didn't know what to do with him, so they just would prop him up, and one of his caregivers would turn on Barney and would just run loops of Barney all day long. Once Martin came out of that, he said, You can't imagine how much I loathe Barney. All day long. He remembered various moments. He was battling insanity and the worst kind of loneliness that you can imagine. He said one time a caregiver was there and he'd been drooling, as would be the case, and the caregiver wiped the drool away from his face, and about that time on the radio he heard Whitney Houston singing that great song, The Greatest Love, which includes the line, You can't take away my dignity. And Martin thought, you want to bet? Do you want to bet? Well, after 12 years, kind of amazingly, one day he squeezed somebody's hand, and then he had some eye movements, and he began to come out of this thing. Now, his coming out of it now means he can sit up, he can speak, but it's through a machine. He can move just a little bit, but he's pretty amazing. He's a college graduate. He has a web design business. He got married a while back, Martin Pistorius. I've thought about this over and over in terms of the passage. When John tries to describe the significance of the resurrection of Jesus, he says, it does not yet appear what we shall be. It does not yet appear what we shall be. When everyone looked at Martin, they thought he was just a vegetable. He was just kind of a problem, if you will, but it did not yet appear what he would be. Google him when you get home. He's a handsome young man. He's got a beautiful smile, has a beautiful wife, has a successful business. He's authored a book. He's done well. It did not yet appear what he shall be. I wonder if this is not a parable of what actually goes on with all of us, is that inside you, I mean, there's your external self that everybody sees day to day. You look at yourself in the mirror. But inside you, there's somebody that maybe others don't see. Maybe you aren't awake to it yourself. Inside you, there's a child of God. Inside you, there is the image of God. Inside you, there is a beautiful, godly, holy, noble person, and others can't see it. Maybe they're not looking for it. They don't want to see it. Maybe you don't recognize it in yourself. It does not yet appear what we shall be. This is my week of going to a fundraising meal. So on Tuesday, I went to the UMAR fundraising luncheon. We've been talking about UMAR recently. It's the agency that we support that provides group homes and art classes for adults that have mental and developmental disabilities. And the speaker at this event, he was really good. Actually, I talked to some church members afterwards, and they said, man, one of them said, we wish he were the preacher at our church. Thank you. He was really good. He was a lawyer, and he was describing the story of his sister. When his sister was young, she had severe disabilities. And the doctor said, they'll just lock her up. She probably won't live even to age 7 or 8, and she'll never be much of anything. But she actually lived into her 50s and worked, was gainfully employed, came to church every Sunday, was very prayerful. And he described her life. It was really moving. And then it's a fundraiser, right? So he came to the fundraising punchline, and he says, sometimes I do something for someone, and they say, thank you. And I sometimes respond by saying, oh, it's the least I could do. And he thought about it. It's the least I could do. He said, generally at fundraisers like this, what I actually give is the least that I could do. I'm taking notes over here, like, I'm going to use that line. That's really good, right? It's like, don't do the least that you can do. That was a good line. His sister, it does not yet appear what we shall be. The next morning, I found myself at the Big Brothers Big Sisters breakfast. The main speaker was Chip Edens, a close friend of mine. He's the pastor at Christ Episcopal down Providence Road here. And Chip told his life story. When he was a little boy, he lived in a household that was rife with tension. His father was an alcoholic, very abusive, terrible environment. He was always told when he was a little boy, you'll never amount to anything. You'll probably wind up in jail one day. His father died from the alcoholism, and Chip was just lost. So he came to have a big brother from Big Brothers Big Sisters. And this guy took him to ball games and did a lot of things with him and helped him to believe in himself. Well, during their high school years, they drifted apart, and then Chip went on, and finally he's in graduate school up in New England, and he's sitting in a Itzhak Perlman concert, and he thinks, like, how did I get here? And he thought about that big brother that he hadn't talked to for years. So he found his phone number, and he called him up, and they were catching up. And then the big brother asked him, he said, Chip, where are you? And Chip said, this is a great line. Chip said, I'm not in jail, I'm at Yale. It does not yet appear what we shall be. While I was at the Big Brothers Big Sisters breakfast, I was missing what was happening across the street, which was the men's shelter breakfast, which is always a cool event. Some of our folks were there. I called Carson Dean this week, who runs the men's shelter, and I said, okay, I'm preaching on this thing. It does not yet appear what we shall be. Tell me a story about anybody that you've run into recently. So he told me about a guy who came to the men's shelter 7 years ago. He's homeless, and we miss homelessness every time, by the way, don't we, right? We hear, oh, homeless, and we blame people, think they're lazy bums or something like that. Many of our homeless are military veterans. Like, they went to Iraq and Afghanistan, and they suffer all kinds of trauma, but the government doesn't have decent programs to do anything for them. They wind up homeless on the streets. They're people from fine families. We've had people out of our own church wind up homeless and in the men's shelter. And that's why we support this really important work. But anyway, so Carson says, this guy, 7 years ago, he comes to the homeless shelter, and he doesn't like it. After one night, he says, this is a terrible place. I don't want to be here. So he left, and for 7 years, he lived under a bridge, lived in a tent, lived just out in the open. He got critically ill, as often is the case. So he had pneumonia, he had asthma, he had COPD. He was not doing well at all. So he went to the hospital. They weren't sure what to do with him, and they said, at the men's shelter, they now have a medical respite area. Why don't you try that? He said, I didn't like the men's shelter before. They said, give it a try for a night. So he went for a night, and he came back for another night. And he kept coming back night after night, and they worked with him in some job training and got his disabilities worked out. And now he's lined up a job, and he's about to leave the men's shelter and be independent. And it's going to be a problem when he leaves, because during the time that he's been there, there's a blind guy who lives at the men's shelter, and this guy is the one who always leads him around, takes him everywhere that he needs to go. He's been the model citizen at the men's shelter. It does not yet appear what we shall be. This week we learned names that I don't know about you, I wish I had not learned them. Britt McHenry and Gina Michelle. Britt McHenry is the woman, the ESPN sportscaster, who was caught on tape with this degrading tirade to a woman at the who was the attendant at the towing place where her car had been towed. It was just, I don't know if you saw this, she brutalized this woman with words, cutting her down because of her teeth, her weight, her voice. It was just a vicious tirade. And you could ask the question, like, who was more degraded, right? The woman who was spoken to, or Britt McHenry herself? And I thought I'd love to pull those two women aside and say to both of them, it does not yet appear what we shall be. For either of you, for both of you, there's great beauty and nobility. It does not yet appear what we shall be. This can actually happen to you in any place. I was at a party recently with some of Charlotte's finest. A few of you probably were there, and it was one of those lovely parties where there's fabulous food and fabulous decorations, and everybody looks fantastic. You know, like everybody is good looking, and everybody's beautifully dressed. And everybody's doing great, because I interviewed quite a number of people. How are you doing? And not one was having a problem in the world. They were all doing great. And you find yourselves in these settings, right? You're super successful, and your world's going wonderfully, and you find yourself talking to someone else, and they also are super successful, and it's just amazing. You think, this is great. Life is good. And when that happens, I want to pull both of you aside and say, it does not yet appear what we shall be. It's not about being super successful and good looking. It's about the beauty that is the image of God in us. It's about being a child of God. Why do we come to Holy Communion? Why do we come and eat something? Jesus, after the resurrection, he eats. He asks for a piece of fish. They give him a piece of fish, boiled fish. It's interesting, isn't it? Like, what is that about? It's almost as if Jesus knew that what we put into ourselves will change us. Like, what are we feeding inside ourselves? Are you feeding kind of this monster that's inside you? Or are you feeding that child of God that is in you? My daughter Sarah has been on all these eating experiments lately. It's pretty interesting. She and her boyfriend, they keep trying to isolate different foods and the impact that it has. So they'll try not to have this for a while, not have this for a while, not have this for a while. And what's amazing is she's having incredible results. She's had allergies all her life, but now she's changed her diet. Like, she has no allergies any longer. She changed another part of her diet, and she's got energy like she doesn't have. She's always energetic. What can that be about? It's amazing. What we put into us changes who we are and how we experience life. How shall I say it? Holy Communion is when we feed that child of God inside us and enable it to grow and to become strong and become perhaps more visible to others. John says it does not yet appear what we shall be, and then he says we will be like God. That's your destiny. That's why you're here, is to become like God. Doesn't appear just yet in you or others, but to remember that. To go through your days looking at yourself and other people, to realize it does not yet appear what we shall be, but the true self inside that will eventually emerge is a beautiful child of God. We look at our broken world and we can say it does not yet appear what this world shall be. God will redeem it all, and all will be good, all will be peace, all will be joy. All will be joy. Then we will have a dignity that cannot ever be taken away, even in eternity itself. For this we give thanks to God.
Hey, thank you for watching, and we hope you got something out of that. If you have any feedback for us, any response that was helpful to you, we would love to hear that. Please let us know. And everything that we put out is free, and we want it to be that way, but if you're able and feel led to support the mission of our church or the cost of providing this online content, here's how to do so.